Hello and welcome to this special bonus episode of The Dairy Edge. Teagasc are running a weekly Let's Talk Dairy webinar series, which is also being made available as a podcast. On this week's webinar, Don Crowley joins Stuart Childs from The Parlour to step through best practice in dry cow procedure.
Okay, good morning everyone and welcome to this week's Let's Talk Dairy. My thanks to James Gunn for filling in for me last week and Willie Buckley and Finola for coming on from AHI to discuss the whole aspect of using reports to select cows and identifying the right cows for potential for selective dry cow therapy. So today I'm delighted to be joined by Don Crowley, the Milk Quality Specialist, as you'll all know, based in Clonakilty, and as you can see there, he's down in the pit in Clonakilty there. So thanks to Anya Reardon, who's behind the camera, helping us out today to deliver this from the pit. So Don is going to talk about getting prepared for dry off, whether it be selective or whether it be the full kit and caboodle in terms of antibiotic and sealer and the processes that are important to follow in order to have a successful attempt at drying off cows. So it's another piece of the jigsaw. I spoke 2 weeks ago about the whole housing element of it. Dan is going to talk about the actual tubing and being prepared for that. And as I said a couple of weeks ago, all of those elements have to come together in order to have successful dry periods. So Dan, I'll throw it over to you there and I'll encourage people to come in with questions as we go along. And I'll try and put them to you as we go, Dan. So thanks very much.
No problem, Stuart. Sure, look, with the rain that's after coming out, it's going to speed things up a little bit, I'd say, for a lot of fellas from the value of definitely with housing. Drying off will go on for the month of November. First calvers will probably whipped out now in the next week or 10 days if they haven't been whipped out already. But I suppose, look, the purpose of this display, I suppose, as such, is just to show the preparation that's involved in getting right. This is one of the most important tools that we see to start looking at is the clippers. I think as farmers, we need to invest in these battery clippers. They're costing about $250 to $350, depending on the make that you'll get. But clipping the tails twice and 3 times a year. But the first thing, anyway, is we need to start clipping the tails now over the next couple of days. Hopefully, some lads have started. Some lads are in by night and out by day, and the tails will be dirty now, and the blade will probably blunt a little bit. But the clipping of the tails is a crucial aspect in this. Especially with all drying off, but especially with selective, because if you've got that paintbrush of a tail flapping around the place, especially when they get a little bit distressed and stuff, like everything gets dirty and everything gets wet. So like if you just look at what we have here, so we have all clippers. I got a little tray in for holding my cotton buds with my little teeth sprayers, my medicated wipes. They'll come in all the boxes, so there's going to be loads of them. They're like sweets. Then I have my roll of paper towel. This is a handy little trick. I find that more and more fellas are at this, like where you get your black bag and you'll have your balls of cotton wool that you'd make the night before, and you'll fire in your methylated spirits in and let it be soaked away. And you could have 40 or 50 balls of cotton wool inside. And that, I suppose, what I've done there is I've just opened it back. So I've taken out my cotton buds with my clean gloves into my couple of trays like that. If you had a half a dozen bottoms of milk bottles cut and cleaned, that you could put your cotton buds inside it. It's a real handy little trick. So I'm not going back in here to pick out my thing with my gloves or tweezers, like Stuart said earlier, is a great thing just to pick them out, because what you don't want is contaminating that, because what I'm using them is to sterilize the base of the teeth, and we'll comment on that afterwards. Like, these products are to sterilize the teeth, not to clean them. You know what I mean? So we need them clean before we go to that process. And then you have your CMT kit if you want to paddle test a couple of high cows and stuff like that. And then ideally to mark the cows then after, whether it's straps, whether it's marking spray. You can get your aerosol marking spray as well, and your gloves. Now, generally, look, when you're starting the process, I suppose, I thought there was one of the drug companies had a great idea where they would give you new gowns with every box of dry cow tubes. It was a great initiative because they knew the quality standard of the gowns outside there. So at least farmers then, when they were starting with a new gown, like this is a very clean gown, and my gloves. I double glove. I'd start with 2 gloves. I plan 2 pairs of gloves. Some people will go to the extreme on the selective, where they'd actually use a new pair of gloves for every cow that they're selectively drying off. Some farmers will use it from the point of view of use the wipes like this to actually disinfect and clean my gloves between the cow, and using the cotton buds then on the teeth. Because I suppose the one thing about these little medicated wipes, it's just trying to open these out when, like, say I have a little bit of soiling on it's very hard to open them out properly every time you'd open, if you were in the middle of the process, you'd see a little brown staining on it. So really, what they are good for is for cleaning the gloves between cows. So I'm disinfecting my gloves within it. But like even at the price of 100 gloves, they're probably, no, they are going up in price. You could talk 20, 25 euro. But like even if I was changing them, the box is going to do, even every 2 cows is going to do 50, 100 cows for me. So, you know, I wouldn't be it's definitely a process, lads, to get into your head not to skimp on. Number 1, to get prepared. Number 2, not to give it time. And number 2, not to skimp on. So, look, for the purposes we don't have cows. We have a couple of dummy udders here just to try and show the process forward. You know, so my cows are milked. Generally, okay, how are people doing? I suppose what are the issues that we group sizes, the amount of cows we're going to take on, when do we actually do it? So I have my cows milked. I spent an hour and a half, whatever it is, milking my cows. It's very difficult to face into a job of drying off without going away and getting a bit of grub, recharging the batteries, get something to eat, get the place lined down, have my cows drafted out and picked out, and let the 5 or 6 cows wait inside the collecting yard. I find the advantage of picking them out afterwards, after milking, and letting them stand while you're having the breakfast is the cows will empty themselves out. They'll have an awful lot of the dumbing done in the collecting yard before I go to drying them off. So then, look, ideally group sizes, 10 cows is probably enough. And if you think about it, 10 cows with 8 tubes per cow, it's 80 tubes. So 10 cows per person. If there's 2 of you there, you could take on 20. And on sealer only, to do it properly, realistically, you'll be taking on 10. But I think the real trick, lads, is when you're coming in, is to, when you're bringing into the pit, maybe to bring in 2 to 3 to 4. Don't be bringing in a full row of cows, because it takes a long time to get through the row and cows get very agitated. It's difficult to get them back into the parlour a second time anyway, because they know there's something wrong. But if you could have your 3 or 4 that you can deal with, off out, and then go again, you know. So I think that through. Yes, Stuart, yeah.
Is there an element of as well of if you move out to 4 or 5 cows again, then you know you're kind of refreshing yourself. It's a change is as good as a rest rather than tubing. You're kind of breaking monotony a little bit, like.
Yeah.
Yeah, just might refocus you to start again.
Exactly, and do you know what it gives you? You're dead right there. It gives you that time to say, "How did that go? Geez, I did all right there. Now the next 4 now again." You're kind of setting yourself up and say, "Geez, that wasn't as good as I'd like to be. I'd go back again and just what do we do different?" You know, and it's just that thing. It is timeless, because it's especially when you're going down and you're getting yourself ready from the point of view of, I need to get it right with my antibiotics and sealer, if that's the process you're going down. But if you're contemplating sealer only, you really need to up your game from the point of view of sealer, because what I'm actually doing is I have an uninfected quarter, an uninfected cow, and I'm putting a sealer into that quarter. So if I push something into it, it is the 6, 8, 10, 12 weeks to really deteriorate the other during that process. But you're right, I think, sure, that's a great point. Just gives you that time. If there was 4 or 5 or 6 or whatever it is, if there's 2 of you, you'd probably take on 6. But you know, that nice food gone, like the thought of looking at 20 down or 30, depending on the size of your parlour, next thing they start dumbing, especially if there's an agitated cow inside it, she upsets the rest of the row. Whereas if she's inside with 3 or 4, you know, I've 4 to do, she's gone. The next bunch then will come away on. And I think what you said there, Stuart's a great point. You know?
And you could wash out as well down in between them as well.
Yeah, you've all that options, like. You can give a quick cause down, you can get your things and ducks in a row. Then you see you can maybe that's the point where a lot of lads will change the gloves in. Like my 4 or 5 done, I'll start with a new set or clean them down, you know. So you're thinking through all that process, because it's just the hygiene of it. It's just everything taking that little bit of time and just give it the time, and it really sets you up then for the autumn ahead. Because it's a job, really. I find there you kind of think of the mindset that we're at. We're thinking now, take the 1st of November, take the 1st of December, and you're after a hard year, and you're just so looking forward to shutting down. You know, I see it with a lot of lads. They just get rid of them, get them done as fast as I can, because I just want to shut down. I want to break coming up to Christmas and stuff. I'm burnt out, but just don't. Just if you stagger it, and just give it the time, it'll really stand to you. So I suppose, Stuart, we'll do a little bit just on the technique now, which is look a lot of the vets and stuff. So you can see there now, even look at my gloves. My gloves, my hand, my rail there now, my new gloves. And look at the state of the gloves there now, just from hanging around like that, like, and this is a clean pallet, to be fair, like, but at least you know, when that kind of option happens, you know, and you can just whip off your glove and straight away you've a new pair of gloves then and you're back in action then again, like, you know. So some things like that, just to make the process a little bit easier. And if it's easy, it will be done. You know, it's more difficult. Some will treble glove, like, depends on the gloves themselves, like, you know. So, look, the first thing is, what I do is you ever notice is, like, when you're milking cows, the mistake that a lot of farmers will make is they assume that the teat is clean after milking, right? And when you lift up the teat, especially for white teat, these are black, so it's hard to see, you'll often see a little black dot right at the point of the opening of the teat. And for a lot of farmers, they don't take any notice of that. They'll put in their antibiotic, they put up their sealer, job done. The antibiotic sees after that contamination in a lot of scenarios. Whereas if I do that with a sealer only, I'm going to be in trouble. So the first thing anyways, probably a good process is if there's a little bit of dirt, especially at this time of year, is like if you teat spray with the teat spray is very good for lifting dirt off the teat itself. So if you get your bit of teat spray first with your paper towels and just give the teats a general clean down and a wipe down, just getting any debris off the teat itself, you're just kind of cleaning it down, trying to make it as clean as possible. Because what you're trying to achieve is you're trying to make sure that the cotton bud is doing what it's supposed to, which is actually to actually disinfect the end of the teeth, is clean them. So what you're trying to do now is really what you're doing. How do I actually disinfect this teeth and clean the invasive teeth? You always have to start at the front. Why don't I start at the back? Because if I start at the back cleaning, right, and there's a little bit of dirt at the base of my thing, I can potentially contaminate the base of the teeth with my wrists or my hands or whatever, because it's microscopic, the bacteria. So what you'll do is you'll try and just go in around the side. That's our back leg, so you wouldn't usually do that because you kick it. But let's say you're going in, you're the next thing, which I don't have and I should have, is the head torch. The head torch is a crucial aspect of this. Forgot to bring it down out of the cabinet. But the head torch is crucial because of the shadows and stuff. I just noticed again, I was coming in. This is a fairly bright, but you need a head torch for this type of procedure. So you put in, you need to scrub that back left, back right. You know, give it a good scrub, and you see the fibrous nature of cotton wool. It's going to lift off any little bit of dirt that's there, which are because it's seeped in methylated spirits. Then you're disinfecting the teeth as well. And then on my back left. Okay, so what I've done there in that scenario now is I've tried to go around and disinfect my 4 teeth without recontaminating them then again. So that's why you're always starting at the front and you end in the back. What you should notice is you should inspect the cotton bud to see is there much siling in the cotton bud itself. Because if there's a good bit of siling on it, it's a great practice to go back and just give the 4 a quick wipe now, because I proper disinfected, in particular for sealer only of the cows. And because I'm moving my cotton bud around, but what it's doing now is it's actually doing the disinfecting because I've shifted any organic matter that was on the base of the teeth. And that's, so now I have my 4 teeth set up. So whether I'm going antibiotic or sealer now, or sealer on its own, I'm very confident now that at least now the base of the teeth are sterilized and clean as much as I can. It's humanly possible. So, like, I suppose then when you're going, you can go your antibiotics then. See, I suppose this is where you have to think about the scenario. This is where help is required for this type of process because, okay, if I lay them out there, let's say that's the way I do it. The cow will dung down on top of them, she'll walk down on top of them, and she'll just make a fool of it. So I'll have to either have a tray or a bench here beside me, or else I'll have to have help. Because you'll all notice yourselves, when I'm going drying, I always start at the back. So I wipe from the front, and I'm starting from the back. So when you go to grab a cow's teeth, and you go to infuse your antibiotic and your sealer, you always keep contact with the cow because the cow stays calm. If you have to leave contact with the cow to go away, to come back to her, they do get very agitated with that, and they're inclined to kick or they're inclined to get restless. So when you're there, if you can keep contact with the cow, you put in your dry cow, put in your sealer, and then you just move from tube to tube and to that and around to so forth. So what I suppose the first thing is, I suppose with our dry cow tubes, when our dry cow tubes, some people bite it off with their, just break it off nice and gently. You're trying to avoid, so that's a sterile top. The tip of that now, the companies have spent a lot of money in sterilizing that. So what you're trying to do is make sure that I make no contact with that. So I have my antibiotic tube. you insert your tube into the teeth like that. Let's say she gives a kick, you try and be in a position that you can hold the teeth like that now. If she just moved around, that you could just hold, and you'll insert your dry coat tube into it, withdraw, and then you're massaging then that up into the teeth, right? Because I'm trying to get the antibiotics from the teeth canal up into the other itself. Okay, stay in contact now with the teeth, and then I'm getting my sealer again. The person that has the teeth seal that's given to you should be handing the teeth seal to you open, because I've been to there now with my tongue, and there is a risk that I could contaminate the base of that when I'm pushing the top off it. So ideally, the person that's handing you the tube is actually giving you the sealer then after. So I'm pinching the top of the teeth now. I'm going to infuse the sealer into it, push my sealer into the teeth, and let it sit now as a nice plug, and then withdraw the sealer. It's probably no harm to squeeze out a little bit of the sealer out of the teeth, if it was there just to show that the sealer is there, and that sealer will just smear along the base of the teeth. And that's my sealer then. And I'll work then anti-clockwise then around. So my back left, my back right, my front left. And what's a good practice then afterwards is to get the liquid cream dips like the masticides or one of these. This is I didn't have some of it left now, but this is the ordinary dip, so that you could actually dip it with the barrier dip then after your procedure then afterwards. And job is done. And then
the masticide, Don, is a very thick, viscous kind of a product, isn't it?
It is, and there's other products there as well. There's the Hyper Dip, there's a number of them, but you're dead right. So what it is it's a very viscous. You can buy it in gallon drums or 10-litre drums just for this process for fellas that are just spraying. But you can buy it. They won't go through a sprayer. It must go through a little cup like this, and you can just dip along, and it forms that barrier at the base of the teeth. And look, again, it's just another aid to try and stop the infection getting in. But that's one thing I must highlight, lads, is just the crucial point about having a head torch ready just for this process. Have it working, have it ready from the point with the shadows and stuff that are in here is a crucial point inside in this. Because sometimes they haven't been used now with a while for a lot of lads, and the batteries might be working and stuff, just to check that the batteries and stuff are working, and just those little bits and pieces make an awful difference.
But question there just came in relation to when should you milk those cows now? Should you be milking them as part of the normal milking routine, drafting them out and then bringing them in, or drafting them out and milking them before you dry them?
Yeah, good point. There's two schools of thought, but I suppose what farmers have found is if they milk those cows and they bring them back around and let them stand for an hour and a half inside the yard, the teeth can have closed and they can be quite difficult to chew afterwards, especially first and second calvers. Whereas farmers might find that if they milk them straight away, and then if they milk them and then dry them off, that they find it easier to administer the tube then afterwards. I suppose there's 2 points about it. Is what we find in general, the best way is that if you can milk them, draft them and leave them in the yard, I think there's 2 advantages in it. Number one, they've emptied themselves out while they're waiting in the collecting yard. That gap is like if you just go in for half an hour, 3 hours for breakfast, whatever it is, it's still easy. Like the process is still easy to administer the tube into the teeth. That's not impacting and fellas that are sealing heifers and stuff know that have never been milked. It's getting very easy to tube these heifers. Whereas if I do it during the milking process, they're 8 to 10 minutes to milk them. And then to go to tube them, they could be there for half an hour. There could be a lot of dunging. They can get very agitated when the routine is out of the way like that. In general, Stuart, what we'd be saying is to draft them out, let them stand, go away for breakfast and so on. And as you say, break them into the bunches then afterwards to let you reset the clock.
There's a kind of psychological element into breaking them into the batches then too, that you're kind of, like you said, rather than facing into 20, you're knocking out 4 at a time and there's a bit of progress being made, whereas even if you've 8 done out of 20, you're kind of looking down the line going, God, there's another 12 of them still to do. And as you said, then they're actually getting quite dirty in the cow standing then as well, that because obviously no matter how much they've cleared themselves out in the collecting yard, they still seem to have, there always seems to be dung there basically, doesn't there?
There is, and you make 2 good points, Stuart. The first thing, I suppose, there and the dunging, I heard Patrick Duggan there in Kilnall made a good point. He said, farmers are inclined to give a fluke dose when they're drying off the cows, to get 2 jobs done. But cows get very loose after fluke dosing. And what he's noticed with outbreaks of mastitis is where the tubes have got so dirty and the passages got so dirty. He's just saying, don't fluke dose when you're drying off, that it's just drying off. And you know, it's a very good point, because cows do, especially you use something like Xanil or something for rumen fluke, cows get very, very loose afterwards. Like, so something to avoid. The other thing is marking these cows. Like, it's the biggest thing, especially if you're breaking them off in batches. If they broke out and got into the milking group, like, how am I going to identify them? You might have straps for the whole lot of them. So maybe straps with your marking spray, like if they're clearly marked, if they're different, look at the pinning. Some people will clip the tails as they've dried them off, so that they know, the ones that clip tails, if anything happened, if she jumped the cubes or anything, that they know she is. But like clipping a tail on the day of drying off, like, she just isn't as clean. If you can do that to 3, 4, 5, 6 days, you know what yourselves, lads, you see how clean and stuff they get. The back of the udders a lot cleaner, the hocks are a lot cleaner. They're just a way different environment altogether. I think the one
now,
other
Dan,
thing
like,
too, yeah.
Coming in off, as you say, coming in off a very low dry matter grass with the last number of weeks, like, cows are loose, like, and they are just
loose.
like they're really after benefiting from the bit of silage, maybe in a lot of cases in the last week or 10 days where people have gone in with it, but they are dirty, like, across the backs of the others. So, like, I know we've spoken about it before. Some people flame them. I believe it's quite common in relation to the robots, in terms of just helping the sensors to identify the teeth and so forth. But works quite well in terms of cleaning up cows' udders as well. And again, it's all eliminating bacteria being in the vicinity of the teeth, and that's in spite of whether we're going sealer only or antibiotic and sealer. But it's just making the process cleaner. And even for the point of view from what you said about the gloves as well, like, I mean, if the cow has very little hair around the teats, they're obviously a lot cleaner to be handling as well, in spite of whether they're in or out or what the scenario is with them, like.
Yeah, and you know, looking at cows there lately, Stuart, like, they have got very hairy, like, the last couple of weeks, whether it's just nose or what, but I suppose they're going into the winter coat now and stuff, and they're just, you know, but they are very hairy, like, and in some cows you'd see the hair is nearly as long as the teats, like, you know, it's nearly camouflaged in the teats in some breeds, like this particular cows. So the flaming is something I'd be like yourself too. I actually see very, very little of it at farm level, very, very little. I'd say if I'd seen 1 or 2 where people are doing it kind of relative routinely, it's not that widespread. I'd say done more so, well, back 30 years ago probably, but it's something I wouldn't see as common. Is it something to come back in? I'd say it would. Like, you know, 1 or 2 farmers said to me, all right, they just, and you made that point, he says, it's like, they dung mad when they're doing it because of the smell of the burning hair, don't they? They get very agitated and stuff, like, you know, when they're doing it. So again, it must be done a couple of days before you're going drying off. And I suppose it's quick. Just to be careful you don't burn your, you know, or hurt them anyway, like, you know. It's a yellow flame, isn't it?
It's a bit like Keith Barry putting his hand through the flame, Dan. That's what I say to people when I'd be talking about it, you know. It is a cool flame technique, kind of, so you want to do it quickly, but like, I suppose if I stuck a flame in under you, you would probably give a little jump too, like.
You would, like, and you see the smell, you see, that's the other thing you see, is the smell of burning hair. It's so different, and like cows or creatures that have it, that just, they get excited over that and agitated. So again, it has to be done. Maybe, I don't know, would you do the last row in every go? You know, if you did the last row or something, and but sure, usually it's the same cows in the last row the whole time. But you know, something like that you can, that they're not agitated, but definitely it needs to be done a number of days, if not a week, before you're actually doing it. You know.
Then there's just a question in there in terms of what's the best. Is the methylated spirits the best disinfectant to use, or are there any other ones that you can be using for cleaning the cows? And there's actually a question in what antibiotics are to be used as well. Now it's a little bit off topic, but maybe you might make a comment on that as well.
Yeah, like, look, I suppose the surgical spirits is probably the best one to get, if you can get it from the point of view, the level of alcohol that's there. If you think about the wipes, you know, that we're using with the COVID, you know, there's 70% alcohol. That's probably the best one to use, you know, where you have, you know, you get your little canisters, because it's better than the methylated spirits, probably, you know, from the point of view as an actual disinfectant, you know. So if you haven't, plenty of you should probably have those alcohol disinfection where you just literally disinfect your hands, you know, the COVID type thing. They'd be actually ideal because they are up to 70-80% alcohol, so they would actually be ideal stored for that kind of view. The other question then was on the antibiotic.
They're very important to
So,
teeth
go on,
spray
Stuart,
after
yeah.
that though, because they'd be inclined to dry out teeth quite a lot with that.
Yeah, you're dead right. Alcohol does, it evaporates off and teeth can dry and chap. So that's where the cream dip after the alcohol disinfectant is brilliant, because you've such a high level of emollients inside it. It's going to keep the teeth lovely and soft, even though you've used a lot of alcohol then on the hands. You know, it's that when you're any person that was doing that, and we all do it, I suppose, disinfecting, it can be hard in your hands, like, you know. So, but look, the dipping, even if you don't have the liquid cream dip, even the teeth spray itself will be huge help. But if you could buy a little can of, get them in 5-litre cans of that masticide type product, you know, the liquid creamed up, the co-op, so your local merchants will have different, and they're all excellent products, whatever brand, Other Gold, there's a rake, there's a good few up there. But I suppose the thing on the antibiotics, the question the antibiotics, look, in general, you need to know your enemy. So ideally, we'd have done our culture and sensitivity beforehand. And in doing a culture and sensitivity, that's what you need to do. I think one of the biggest mistakes we make is it has to be sterile. It must be a sterile container, not the milk quality, the samples that you have. It must be a sterile container that you're having. And what do you do first? My milk carding has come back, and there's a cow there, and she's 6 million. And what you'll do is you'll paddle test the 6 million cow, and let's say the back right quarter is the high one. It's the sample. I take a sample then from the back right. I find in it myself is like, if you have to go in under a cow like that, you will contaminate it. I find in it, like, I'd be inclined to keep the bottle back here, just squirt the milk from there, and all I'm looking for is just literally a half inch, 1 centimeter milk within the bottle itself, and just to cork it, making sure that I put it down. But ideally, that there's no contamination. Get into the bottle, I'll put the cow number and the date on it, pop it into some ice water, and send that off. You see what that is? It'll tell me, is it a Staph aureus? Is it a Strep aureus? Maybe it's a combination. If it's Staph aureus, you generally need a longer acting antibiotic. And where people can get caught is they're using shorter acting antibiotics with short milk withdrawals because they're handy for next year. But the biggest thing is your vet is going to look and he's going to see, number one, which antibiotic works, which one is it sensitive to, and number two, he's probably going to, or she is going to go for longer acting, depending if you have a staph or a strep. Probably a good guide to have as well is, if you have an idea of which mastitis tube works well on your farm, inform your vet about that. Because he'll say, look, you know, Sinilax, or what there's a corresponding dry coat that's very similar to a lot of the antibiotics, lactating coat tubes that are being used. So he might keep you, or she might keep you on that preparation. So the biggest thing is the culture and sensitivity. Know your enemy and what bug it is, and then your sensitivity will build that up. You know, because as you can't afford really to get this one wrong, because this is my chance of putting an antibiotic preparation for 8, 10, 12 weeks to help reset the clock. I won't cure them all, but at least what I'm trying to get is an 85% cure rate. You'll see that in your cell check report. So my antibiotic needs to be able to kill 8.5 out of every 10 cows I dry off. So that's cows that are over 200,000. Of every 10 I dry off, they're over 10. My antibiotic should be curing 8 to 9 out of them. 8 to 9 out of those 10 should be calving down under 200,000 next spring, like we went through last week. So just, you know, I think, yeah.
Yeah, no, very good. I think it's a good summary, and I suppose, again, just as a bit of reference material, we have on the AHI website, there's a video of the O'Sullivans in the stuff drying off cows on their own farm there recently as well, just in showing the technique that they use. And I suppose, why did we focus on the Sullivans? Sullivans had only 50 cows out of 500 cows that actually got an antibiotic and sealer. Now they're a split calving herd, all right. But in the last couple of years, they've done an awful lot of selective dry cow and done it very successfully. And it's a very good example for people to take a view of that video and see how the lads are doing it there as well, Dan. So I suppose if people want to check in on that, and then I suppose you pointed out being prepared is important. So you need to get the methylated spirits. Gloves are hard got sometimes at the moment with the whole COVID scenario. Marker sprays, making sure gates are well secured when cows are divided. That's a disaster point for people if cows get mixed, obviously trying to know what's what. And then even just a barrier teeth spray as opposed to the teeth spray, maybe using the likes of the cream dips, as you said there, to just soften the the udders and the teats are to kind of and act as a water barrier, and also to kind of make sure that the teat doesn't dry out. And just before I finish, then Don, actually, there's just one final question popped in there. Is it okay to take a milk sample from the bull tank for culture and sensitivity testing? No, we would have been saying that before. I think my understanding of it is we've kind of moved away from that. But, they're not big fans of them in the labs anymore because they're just a bit too ambiguous.
And they are, to be fair, like you're right, Stuart. You see, if I take a bulk tank sample, all the bacteria in the farm are in that. So for the lab to differentiate what actually bug is in the udder of the cow, it's too ambiguous. You could be led down a garden path. So what you're really doing is you're taking a high heifer, a high second, a high third, and a high fourth. The reason people have been advocating doing a bulk tank is just to see, is strep agalactia floating around in the herd? If it was, because the bulk tank would pick that up for fear of missing the 4 individuals. That's the only valuable tank is. It's of no other value, because the individual cows, what you're trying to do is get the bacteria that's in the udder of that cow, not that's in the environment. And the problem with a bulk tank one is all the cocktail of bacteria that's in the environment are going to culture in that. And so for the lab technicians, they're looking at a bulk tank samples and saying, which one is actually relevant towards the cow, So it's too misleading.
So I think Willie has a good way of putting it. It's like identify the cow, identify the quarter, and take the milk sample from the quarter, because you're not diluting the sample. Just like you showed there a minute ago, you're not diluting by putting in milk from maybe clean quarters into the sample, you're kind of diluting down the capacity of the lab then to grow that up. So if you just take it from the actual non-infected quarter, you're going to get a better result in terms of the sample.
One of the vets made this point, I thought it was a great point, like a third of the samples that go to the regional vet lab are contaminated. Yeah. So that means if you think about this in a logic way, if I was drying off 100 cows, that means 30 of those 100 cows' teats were contaminated at drying off procedure. And this what worries us is if I'm getting a third of my samples contaminated and I'm supposed to have done a good process, I'm going to be right trouble then on sealer only. So it really highlights the thing we need to up our game. So if a third of the samples are contaminated, and I'm supposed to be doing the job right, that means I'd contaminate 30 out of 100 cows. If you follow that logic through, so we really, really have to up our game. And and I know that farmers are probably sick to hear us talk about this, but we're looking at the reports and we see how it's going wrong, and the consequences are huge for the next lactation. That's the bloody problem.
Yeah, and it's a bit like the grass scenario, Dan. Like the next lactation starts here, basically, from a drying off point of view, doesn't it?
Yeah. Oh God, yeah. And then just the last point there for anyone, maybe a couple of bags of the disinfectant line for the cows freshly dried off that you can fire in that cubics for the first week after drying off or something. And if you have any free milking cow that's inclined to leak, just drive her back in about 5 to 7 days later and reseal her. That'll stop her.
Okay, we'll leave it at that, so Dan. So thanks very much, Dan, and thanks very much, Tanya, for behind the camera there. We'll be back again next week to talk about the grass targets. Weather's probably going to do for a lot of the grass scenario, but just to make sure that people are closing up the right stages and so forth. So we'll have a chat about that next week. My thanks again to both Dan and Anya there, and wish you all well for the week, and we'll talk to you next week. Thanks.
That's all for this week's Let's Talk Dairy webinar series. And don't forget to look out for more bonus episodes each week. I'll be back with our usual Dairy Edge interview on Monday, so do listen in then. I'm Emma Louise Coffey, and thanks for listening.